once wrote a little story of traveling through New York with his friend. He said, I was in New York the other day and rode with a friend in a taxi. When we got out, my friend said to the driver, "Thank you for the ride. You did a superb job of driving." The taxi driver was stunned for a second. Then he said, "Are you a wise guy or something?" "No, my dear man, I'm not putting you on. I admire the way you keep your cool in heavy traffic." "Yeah," the driver said and drove off. "What was that all about?" I asked. "I'm trying to bring love back to New York," he said. "I believe it's the only thing that can save the city." "Well, how can one man save New York?" "Well, it's not one man. I believe I have made that taxi driver's day. Suppose he has 20 fares. He's going to be nice to those 20 fares because someone was nice to him. Those fares in turn will be kinder to their employees or shopkeepers or waiters or even their own families. Eventually, the goodwill could spread to at least 1,000 people. Now that isn't bad, is it? But you're depending on that taxi driver to pass your goodwill to others." "Well, I'm not depending on it," my friend said. "I'm aware that the system isn't foolproof, so I might deal with 10 different people today, and if out of 10 I can make 3 happy, then eventually I can indirectly influence the attitude of 3,000 more." "Well, it sounds good on paper," I admitted, "but I'm not sure it works in practice." "Well, nothing is lost if it doesn't. It didn't take any of my time to tell that man he was doing a good job and neither received a larger tip nor a smaller tip. If it fell on deaf ears, so what? Tomorrow there'll be another taxi driver I can try to make happy." "You're some kind of nut," I said. "Well, that shows how cynical you become. I have made a study of this. The thing that seems to be lacking, besides money, of course, for our postal employees, is that no one tells people who work for the post office what a good job they're doing. But they're not doing a good job. Well, they're not doing a good job because they feel no one cares if they do it or not. Well, why shouldn't someone say a kind word to them?" We were walking past a structure in the process of being built, and we passed 5 workmen eating their lunch. And my friend stopped. "That's a magnificent job you men have done. It must be difficult and dangerous work." The workman eyed my friend suspiciously. "When will it be finished?" "June," a man grunted. "Ah, that really is impressive. You must all be very proud." We walked away and I said to him, "I haven't seen anyone like you since the man of La Mancha." Says, "When those men digest my words, they will feel better for it. Somehow the city will benefit from their happiness." "But you can't do this all alone," I protested. "You're just one man." "Well, the most important thing is not to get discouraged. Making people in the city become kind again is not an easy job, but if I can enlist other people in my campaign—" "Hey, you just winked at a very plain-looking woman," I said. "Yes, I know," he replied, "and if she's a school teacher, her class is in for a fantastic day." I think these interesting little stories of spreading good cheer, spreading love are interesting, fascinating, and quite frankly, sociologists would say they work. Little acts of kindness, little acts of generosity, little acts of encouragement often change the entire environment of a social structure, one at a time, a little at a time. Some acts are small and cost nothing, as a friend of Art Buchwald said in this story, but sometimes acts of love are huge and require great sacrifice. We've been studying through the Gospel of Mark here at the Gathering House and kind of go chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and I don't know, we've been in this for about a year, I think, and so we're at chapter 14. And in chapter 14, there's this act of outrageous love that is well worth looking at because it's sacrificial, and it's almost confusing in how it plays out. If you got a Bible, turn to Mark chapter 14. And if you've got, we provide some of these blue and white Bibles around on the tables in front of you, and reach over, grab one if you don't have one of your own. Mark chapter 14, you will find it on page 694. It's a time when one particular woman who was a friend of Jesus used up an entire year's worth of perfume all at once on him. Let's read the story. It says, "Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came in with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, 'Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor.' And they rebuked her harshly. 'Leave her alone,' Jesus said. 'Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want. But you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Let's pray. Lord, we ask that your Spirit would speak to us today through your holy word. That this real incident that occurred at a time and a point in history that you decided by your power, by your grace, needed to be recorded and passed on to your church. There's a lesson here. There's something you wanted us all to know and understand through every language and culture and time and season. Everybody who's ever lived on any different continent who has heard your gospel has heard this story. And so, Lord, teach us today why. What does this mean to us and what do you want us to do with it? May your Spirit be here as you speak to us. Pray this in your holy name. Amen. Interesting, it begins by saying, okay, it's a couple days before the Passover. The Passover is the highest Jewish holiday. It was expected at the time to go to Jerusalem and have a Passover at least once in your lifetime. Every Jewish person, no matter where they lived in the world, at least once in their lifetime desired to have Passover in Jerusalem. It was the greatest, highest holy holiday. If you lived within 15 miles of the city of Jerusalem, by law, you had to celebrate Passover in Jerusalem. And in fact, it was one season when, like, all the hotels, all the lodgings, everyone opened up their home. It was free lodging. It was this community that would be saying, okay, as Passover's coming, wherever the guest room is, we open up. We don't know who will be coming. We're going to invite a guest in, and everybody gets free lodging. But still, the cities would swell so much that at one point, one of the historians, Josephus, said the population during Passover was about 3 million people showing up in Jerusalem. 3 million in ancient history in those times. The chief priests at this time hate Jesus. They want to kill him and destroy him. We're picking up already in the story where they detest him because he's not one of them. And he's preaching a gospel that they're confused by because it's not according to their laws, their order, their rituals, their way. So they decided to kill him. But at a time when you have 3 million visitors in Jerusalem is not the time to do something with Jesus, who is super popular in the Decapolis and up in Galilee and in other regions. He's super popular with all of these people who've come to celebrate the festival. So they're like, we can't do anything now because the folks would riot. So we got to do something low key. We got to get rid of Jesus somehow in a manner that no one sees and no one can know. Otherwise a riot will take place and the Roman forces will rise up against us. The Romans were so scared of all those Jews getting together at one time that they doubled and tripled all of the guard that was there. So they would bring in Roman legions from outside of the Jerusalem area. They'd bring them in from Caesarea. They'd bring them in from Galilee. They had a huge fortress. The Antonian fortress was a tower which overlooked the temple area. They would actually pack that with soldiers. They were ready for riots at any time. The Romans were on guard knowing this festival could go bad at any moment. And so it's a high, volatile, explosive time, and it was every year. But this year with Jesus, things are even worse. Jesus is staying at a friend's house in Bethany. Bethany's about 2 miles south of Jerusalem. So he goes into Jerusalem every day and every day walks back out to Bethany and back in and back out. That's where he's been staying. And it's a few days before Passover, meaning, as we will read the rest of Mark as the story will go on, it's only a couple of days before he's about to be crucified. And he knows it. This is one of the last incidents in his earthly life. And it's interesting because it says he goes to Bethany and he's at the home of Simon the leper. What a great name. How'd you like that for a nickname? Simon the leper. That'd be like, okay, you're Joe the diseased, right? And this is Debbie the sickly. I'd like you to meet Debbie the sickly, right? It's a terrible name for someone, right? It's Simon the leper. A leper was someone who was actually cursed and could not hang out in social, couldn't be in public, you couldn't go into their home. So clearly this is a guy who'd been cured, that Jesus had miraculously restored him. But, he was so established, everyone still called him Simon the leper, even though he didn't have leprosy anymore. And the fact that he's hosting Jesus and hosting this feast in his home is pretty unusual because Simon the leper, by law, would have not been able to be with other people or have anyone else come into his house. By law, he couldn't do that because it was a contagious disease. So he's been cured, and now he's hosting this incredible rabbi, the one who's healed him, and he's throwing this party, and he has a gathering, and a bunch of people are staying at his house, and he's doing this feast as they're preparing for the Passover to take place. And the same story is told in the Gospel of John. We're in Mark. Look at John chapter 12. Mark, Luke, John. That's how the sequential order of the Gospels go. So we're in Mark. Go to John chapter 12, because a few more details will emerge in the Gospel of John, some details that Mark left out. In John chapter 12, verse 1, it says, 6 days before the Passover. Now, I know Mark said 2 days, but he said 2 days before Passover and the unleavened bread. Those were actually two different festivals. And Jews mark time sometimes by only counting the days in between and not the days when things actually took place. So don't get all worked up about the 2-day, 6-day thing. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. So now we get more detail. We know that the woman who's doing this act with Jesus is actually his good friend Mary. Mary's an interesting character. There's a bunch of Marys in the Bible. There's the Virgin Mary, and there's Mary Magdalene, and there's Mary, the mother of James and John. Now we have this Mary, Mary of Bethany. Mary of Bethany has a sister Martha, and she has a brother Lazarus. We actually know more of Mary of Bethany than we do 8 of the 12 apostles. She occurs more times in the Bible and does more stuff in the Bible than many of the other apostles. So her story comes about quite a bit. The first time we ever encounter her is in Luke chapter 10. And in Luke chapter 10, Jesus is at the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, these two sisters and brother, and he's teaching and this sort of thing. And Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, drinking in his wisdom, drinking in the things he's saying. She's learning from him. She's studying, which was highly unusual because in that Jewish culture at that time, women weren't really taught. They were like, you have this job, you raise babies, you stay in the kitchen, you make the home. Men do all the studying and understanding. So for her to brazenly sit there and learn from Jesus, and Jesus teaching her and having no problem with it was kind of the beginning of saying, hey, he's doing something socially different. Meanwhile, Sister Martha is in the kitchen making all the food. She gets frustrated. She comes out and says to Jesus, hey, tell Mary to get off her rear and get in here and help me. I'm doing all the work and she's doing nothing. And Jesus' response to Martha is, Martha, Martha, you're busy with so many things, but none of that is necessary. The most important thing is right here. What Mary's done is pick the best thing. Learning from Jesus. So sort of like, put all that down, set it all aside, just make something simple. We'll eat peanut butter sandwiches, come in here, and this is the most important stuff, what we're doing right here. So the first time we see Mary, it's interesting because she's sort of this brazen, bold, defiant person when it came to the cultural norms, but clearly someone spiritually, like a sponge, drinking in spiritual stuff, but also deeply connected with Jesus. The next time we see her is in John chapter 11, and in this case, her brother Lazarus has died. And Mary and Martha knew the sickness that he had was bad. They sent word to Jesus because he was way the heck up north. They sent word to him saying, you better come quick because Lazarus is sick and this one's bad. And if you would get here, you could cure him. Jesus hears about it. The messenger comes to him and he goes, okay, I've heard about this, so don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And he stays 2 days longer where he is. And then he finally says, all right, let's go down and see Lazarus. And the apostles around him go, yeah, because he's really sick. And Jesus pretty much says, well, no, he's dead now. But I'm going down there so that the glory of God will be shown. He goes down to Martha and Mary's house. Lazarus is dead. He's actually been dead now for 4 days. They've already had the funeral, already done the arrangements. They've put him in the tomb. They've rolled the big stone in front of him. It's over. And Jesus arrives on the scene, and Mary stays in the house. Martha comes running out to Jesus and falls at his feet and says, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. And he has this conversation with her about, well, whoever believes in me won't die. And he says, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus says, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. I am this hope you have. I'm it. And then he goes to the tomb, And Martha goes and grabs Mary, brings her out of the house, and the only time Mary speaks in the entire Bible is in John chapter 11, and she actually repeats what Martha said. Only time she speaks, the only thing she ever says, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus consoles her, and the next thing he does is he raises Lazarus from the dead, who's been dead in the tomb for 4 days. In fact, Martha tries to stop it from happening. He says, all right, roll the tomb away. She's like, Jesus, he's been in there for 4 days, and already he's been rotting, and it's going to smell bad. I mean, they know he's dead. And Jesus has them roll the stone away anyhow, and he cries. There's a fascinating passage. He's angry. The Jewish leaders are watching him. He has this anger about what they're doing. All these people are studying. There's a whole crowd gathered around, and he says, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes up, walking out of that tomb with his grave clothes still on. Like, untangle his grave clothes, get him dressed, and let's kind of start this thing fresh. Everybody knew Lazarus was dead. That's the only other time we see Mary. And then the next time we see her, just days later, is this incident. And another thing that's weird is she doesn't speak here either. She says nothing. Jesus is at the table. Lazarus is at the table. And in this case, at this dinner party, everybody's like, Jesus, Lazarus, Jesus, Lazarus. Everybody wants to sit by them. Jesus, tell me more about who you are and what you're... Lazarus, where'd you go when you died? What was it like? Was it dark? Did you have anything? What was going? You can imagine the conversation. Everybody wanted to sit with those two. Lazarus, the fact that he was everyone knew he was dead and raised from the dead, that evidence of the power of Jesus was so great that the people who hated Jesus wanted to kill Lazarus too. We got to kill this guy because he's up walking around now. We got to put him back down in the grave. And in the middle of this dinner, with all of this conversation, with all of this wonder, awe, shock, fear, everything, joy, everything that you can imagine, all the emotions swirling at this dinner. Lazarus, who was dead, is now there. Jesus is here with us. Simon the leper, I can't believe we're sitting in the leper's home eating. I've walked by this house 30 times. You could never go in because he was a leper before, and now he can have a dinner. Can you imagine the energy that was in that room? And in the middle of all that energy and that joy and that wonder and that awe, in comes Mary. She doesn't say anything. She's got a little alabaster jar. Alabaster is like a translucent stone. In those days, they'd be about 16 ounces, and in it is perfume. She walks over to Jesus, and in Mark it says she breaks it over her head. And I think, it's translucent stone. I doubt she goes, peace, on his head. I think she breaks the wax seal that held the perfume, begins to pour it over his head, down his body, and all the way down to his feet. Because the way they would have eaten in that culture is you didn't sit at a table. In that culture, it was always a low table, and you laid down on your left arm and ate with your right. So you lay in a position that way. That was their kind of low table, sitting on cushions and pillows. So Jesus is already kind of laid out on the floor. She walks in, says nothing, breaks this perfume. It goes on his hair, into his beard, down through his clothes, goes to his feet. By the time she gets to his feet, she has unbound her hair, which was like, that was like a sign of modesty, was to keep your hair bound up. She lets her hair go, which you only did in the presence of someone you're intimately in relationship with and who you know very closely, like a family member. She takes her hair and uses it as a towel to wipe his feet and wipe the dirt and the grime off of him while that ointment is there. 20 years ago, I was studying this passage, and I'm like, I wonder what it smelled like. Because it said the fragrance filled the house, right? So I look it up, and what does it mean, nard? I do a little typing. Oh, spikenard. It's something called spikenard. What the heck is that? So I do some searching. At the time I had a secretary, I said, find me some spikenard. And so she calls around. She spends about a week doing this, and she comes back to me. She goes, I found it. I've looked all over. There's only one place that you can find this. This is kind of almost, internet was young in those days. And she said, there's a little Pakistani shop up in Berkeley. Berkeley, of course Berkeley would have it. Right? You ever been to Berkeley? It's like, say no more. So I'm like, all right, and Berkeley is about 30 minutes away, so I jump in the car, I drive up to this place, Casa Larnac, and, go down Telegraph Avenue, hunting them up, go into this little spices and ointment shop, and I buy some vials of spikenard, and open this baby up, and it doesn't smell like anything our culture would ever use for a perfume. It is a unique fragrance. It's earthy. In fact, I'll let you guys sample some. Pass that around. Take a whiff. Pass that around. Take a whiff. Pass that around. Right? Pete, take a whiff. Pass that around. Pass that around as you smell it right there. August, take a whiff. Pass it around. Make it work the tables. Get it to the back. Let everybody else to see. Bill, I got one more. Take a whiff. It is strong stuff. Just put a little dab on your finger. Just go like that, and then smell your hands. It'll linger. It will linger on you. And I remember taking it to the office and walking around the office. It was my secretaries. One of my other secretaries, her name was Debbie Eden. She's like, ooh, this is awful. Oh, I can't stand it. And I'm like, hey, one of these days you're going to get to heaven. You're going to sit on Jesus' lap. What are you going to say then? Hey, Jesus, I love you, but you stink. You didn't take a bath, right? It is an interesting smell. It is a heavy, earthy smell. It's a smell of like old leather libraries. I think of all sorts of things. And when I was first sniffing it and smelling it, one of the things I thought, it's the smell of the grave. Jesus will say of this has been anointed for my burial. Now come on, you make those things move around. You guys still have yours? Is it passed back already? Make a move. Last time I did the sermon, it was in a room of about 700 people, and I would preach another 15, 20 minutes. I'm like, one of them had only made it to the third row. I'm like, hey, come on, get it around. Everybody wants to smell it. Give it a whiff. Fascinating stuff, isn't it? Spikenard. Those little vials you have, they're about 1/6 of 1 ounce, right? That's how much is in those things. So just a small amount. She's pouring 16 ounces on Jesus. So when the Bible says, and the fragrance filled the house, you know the fragrance filled the house and the neighborhood and, outdoor. Isn't that an interesting smell? That's the smell of Jesus. That's the smell of Jesus. That would be woven into his hair, worked back in his hair, down into his beard. See, because that culture, you didn't go up and take a shower every day. Water's difficult. It's precious, hard to get. So typically what you would do is you might bathe once a week, once every 2 weeks, but you would oil yourself a lot. And so when he puts the oil on his hair, when she's doing this with him, he's going to wear this oil for the next several days. That cologne, that fragrance is on him. It's on him when he's at the Last Supper. That's what he smells like. That's on him when he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he prays, Lord Jesus, or he prays, Lord God, please let this cup pass from me. That's what he smelled like. When he does his 6 trials, his trials in the dead of night, every single one of them being held illegally. That's what he smelled like when he stood before Pilate, when he stood before Herod, when he stood before the Sanhedrin. When the Roman soldiers took their whips and their lashes and they beat him savagely, that's what he smelled like until his blood flowed and the blood mixed with the fragrance of the spikenard. When he was nailed to the cross, he still smelled like that. And when Joseph of Arimathea and when Nicodemus took his body down from the cross, he still smelled of the spikenard. They added some more fragrances, quickly got him into the tomb for it to be Passover, sealed the tomb, and the tomb would still smell like spikenard. That smell you're smelling. The end of his life, that's the Jesus smell. And you know what? It doesn't smell like anything we would ever use. There's nothing in our cultural that's an equivalent for it. You're not going to go down to Nordstrom's and then get, I'd like some spikenard. They won't have it at Nordstrom's. You're going to have to go to Berkeley, right? And in their day, it was super expensive. What you had, those little vials, they're about $10. So don't try to steal one. They're not worth anything. And I'll want them back before this day is through. Yes. So don't run off with my spikenard. It's a plant that it's from India, high up in the Himalayas, and they kind of grind it down and they make this fragrance. It's a unique fragrance. It's a fascinating fragrance. It's an interesting smell, isn't it? The smell of Jesus. I didn't know until I started hanging out with it for a little bit and spending some time with it. And I can tell you, I've had incidents in my life when my wife and I were walking out of the car, we're getting in the car, and suddenly I'll smell spikenard. And I know that fragrance. I'm like, something's going on. I just smelled spikenard standing here getting ready to go in the car, and there's no reason I should smell spikenard in this location. And I knew Jesus is present. He's trying to get my attention. He's wanting to talk to me. I'm supposed to pray about something. Something's going on. In their day, the spikenard was super precious. The way that you would sometimes save your money is you would invest it in some object of art, or in this case, perfume. Perfume was always a good one. And you would actually take that perfume and you would set it sort of back in an area because you would accumulate this money, and rather than have it all get stolen or rather than try to keep it all in big bags and stuff, sometimes they would invest it in an object like a bottle of expensive perfume, and then they could kind of sort of control that. One of the ideas would be that as we ever gotten to the place where the house is going down or the farm has gone bad or the crop of the harvest has not happened, we dig out this commodity that we have, the perfume, we can sell it and save the farm. See, it was your way of investing your money. It's a way of saving it. We're told in the scriptures, it's actually 300 denarii is the term that's actually used, and NIV just translated, it's about a year's wages. That's what it is. For a workman, you do the math, their culture, our time, it's somewhere around a $25,000 bottle of perfume. A $25,000 bottle of perfume. She walks in, breaks the seal, and pours $25,000 of perfume on Jesus right now. And the reaction of the crowd is not, wow, that's so cool, right? The reaction of the crowd is, what do you think you're doing? What a waste. What an extravagant waste. You have this possession. Something else could have been done with it. Why would you waste it like that? You should take it and give it to the poor, right? So give it to the poor. And Jesus' response is, you'll always have the poor. This was not set aside for the poor. This gift was for me. It's an interesting phrase Jesus uses because, even in our context, giving to the poor seems to be the highest, most noble thing, right? Go sell something and give it away to charity and that sort of stuff. And here's Jesus saying, oh no, sometimes gifts aren't meant to be distributed like that. Sometimes there's a gift that's given straight to Jesus, and it's okay. He says, she's anointed me for my burial. I think that's interesting because if you kind of backtrack the story a little bit, the same story is told in Matthew chapter 26. And in Matthew 26, the whole evening begins with Jesus saying, oh, by the way, guys, in 3 days I'm going to be crucified, but don't worry about it, I'll rise again. That's how the story begins. He gives them the news. It's almost like nobody believed Jesus when he said that. When Jesus told his disciples, I'm going to die. I'm going to be buried in the tomb, but I will rise again. They're like, I wonder what he means by that. And that tends to be the response. They're sitting at this meal, talking to Lazarus, talking to Jesus, preparing for the Passover. As we will have read in the past and we'll read on, they're still jockeying for position. Who gets to be the most important apostle? Who gets to be the chief one who sits on Jesus' right or sits on Jesus' left? They're all about their position, their power, their influence. They're all about sort of when Jesus comes into power, this is where we're going to, and you hear him say he's going to die, right? Yeah, whatever. When he gets into power, though, I'm going to be on his right. You'll be on his left. We'll be the guys who influence and rule everything. They're having this sort of what's in it for me dialogue. When in walks quiet Mary, I'm sure she was an introvert, and she walks in as the only one who really understands what's going on. It's like she's the only one who believed him when he said, I'm going to die. She's the only one who believed him when he also said, but I will rise again. Why? Because her brother Lazarus was sitting at the table, and she and Martha would have been the ones who washed the body, wrapped him up, and had him placed in the tomb. She would have known he died. She's the only one who believes in Jesus' death and his resurrection in this moment in history. She walks in without saying a word to anybody and prepares Jesus for burial. The only time it would have not been considered an extravagant waste of a $25,000 bottle of perfume would be if you used it to embalm a body that was going into the grave, to anoint it for burial. In that case, it would have been culturally acceptable. This is her extravagant, loving gift to Jesus. And it's so shocking to everybody else. They're like, why would you waste anything like that on Jesus this way? And only Jesus and her know it's about love. It's about how much she loves me. She loves me more than everybody else sitting in the room right now. She will give everything she has. She will take her safety net of financial security and she will hand it over to me because she loves me. She has prepared me for my burial. She gets it. It's almost like he's saying, and no one else does. Leave her alone. He tells them, leave her alone. Because in the Greek there, the words they're using, they're indignant, they're raging, they're snorting is the way you could translate the word. They're snorting with anger at her. What a waste, what a fool, what an idiot, what have you done? You've taken $25,000 bottle of perfume, you poured it on Jesus at this dinner. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. What's wrong with you? It should have been given to the poor. Of course, we'll find out that isn't what they really meant. What they really meant is, hand it over to Judas because he keeps the coin box. He's going to sell it and he's going to take his cut off the top. They're not mad about the waste of it. Was hers to give. It didn't even belong to them. She owned it. It was her perfume. So she can do anything she wants with what is hers. Why are they mad? They're mad because they don't get to skim off the top. At least Judas is. Others are mad because they feel like the most important thing is this could buy food for the poor. And Jesus is saying, no, the most important thing is her love for me and what she's giving it for. That's interesting. What did Mary know that the others didn't? What did she understand? And she wiped his feet with her hair. That same smell is going to be lingering on her for days. She's going to have the smell of Jesus in her hair, and the smell of him that is being beaten by the Romans is on her. The smell of Jesus who's being nailed to the cross is on her. And I got to believe she's one of the women. The scriptures tell us several women where they're watching from far off. I got to believe she was one. And the Jesus who was hanging on the cross, smelling of spikenard and blood and dirt and sweat, she could smell her hair and say, I'm with him. I'm with him. This is who he is, and this is who I am. I'm with him. And it would linger all the way into the tomb. And I kind of get a kick out of the fact she's not one of the women who will appear on Resurrection Sunday to go anoint the body. Mary Magdalene and other ladies went and did that. Why didn't Mary of Bethany also show up that Sunday morning to go with them to anoint the body? 2 reasons. 1, she'd already done it. That's the first one. Already anointed him for burial, number 1. Number 2, he's not going to be there. I'm the only one who believes him when he says he's going to rise from the dead. She believes him. She's the only one of the women that we read about who doesn't show up at the tomb. What an incredible character she is. Every now and then, I have observed in my life where Jesus calls people to give an extravagant gift of love. In some ways, Mary had it easier because Jesus is right there physically in front of her. She can give the gift to Jesus and have the conversation directly with Jesus. You and I, 2,000 years removed from a Jesus who is already broken free of the grave, walked among them, and ascended up into heaven where he sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. It's like, how do we give an extravagant gift to you? How do I do that, Jesus? Because you're sitting in heaven now, waiting for the day when you return. You're not here on the earth for me to touch and experience in the same capacity. And I've got to think that Jesus would say to us, I've told you who my body is. All of you who've united with me, you're my body. So if you want to do something for me, do it for those who are part of my body. Give your extravagant gift of love to the body of Christ. And I've sat back and I've thought about people in my life who've done that. People who didn't take the normal, easy path. People whom God said, I've given you opportunities to do some things and I want you to do them. I knew a couple in an old church of mine that regularly took crack cocaine babies who were being born to death. They knew when these children were born, they'd be born screaming and wailing and going through crack withdrawals. And this couple would take those babies, and many times they knew those babies are only going to live a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Once in a while, one would outlast, and it would be shocking. And they would love this child. They would love this babies. They would hold them. They would rock them. They would comfort them as they screamed and wailed going through their cocaine withdrawals. Once in a while to healing, but many times to death. And their extravagant love for Jesus was to say, we have this home, we have these arms, we have this opportunity. And that's what they gave Jesus as a gift. I knew people who had great careers. I knew one couple, he has a great career in education, and she was on the same path. And one day, in the middle of their sort of climbing the ladder of being in educators and him going off to be a principal, they suddenly felt like, you know what, we're supposed to give it all up, pack up our kids, and move to Kenya, where God wants us to make a difference in the lives of all of these kids who barely can read or write, who have maybe one parent, some have no parents, and we're going to actually take over an entire school in Kenya, and we're going to run it to health and healing. We're going to bring our knowledge and our wisdom of how to do this correctly. We're going to give up everything we have in the affluent San Francisco Bay Area, and we're going to go to Kenya, and we're going to live out our lives. And we're taking our kids with us. So they'd leave their aunts and uncles and their cousins and their grandparents, and Rick and Carrie Maples moved to Kenya and have been there for years since. I knew a couple one time, a pastor friend of mine and his wife, and they had 2 kids of their own. They were a neat little couple, fantastic people, and one day they just felt overwhelmed that God was telling them to adopt a crack baby. And then it turned out that the daughter had this young girl, she had a little brother born 2 years later, and they were told to adopt him too. So they adopt these 2 kids, African American, and a couple of my friends, they're white as Wonder Bread. And they adopt these 2 African American crack baby kids and raise them from the time they're toddlers clear into adulthood with trauma and difficulty and pain and suffering and hardship and anguish and learning disabilities and rage and withdrawals and all that would go with it. And they took this couple in their lives and they were just exhausted when it was done. But this was their extravagant love for Jesus. Jesus said, I've given you this home. I've given you these finances. I've given you this position in life. And I want you to give me an extravagant act of love back. And the act of love is going to be this. You're going to take 2 individuals who are part of my body who have no hope if you don't reach out to them. And you're going to take them on. And so they did. I'm so glad I stayed active with them for Facebook all these years because I watched while those 2 kids who were, wow, the trauma and drama they went through. To watch them both achieve incredible adulthood and serve in our armed forces, become a strong, noble woman and a strong, excellent man when no one had given them a chance. Sometimes the extravagant act of love looks like that. I had a group of friends once who were in their 50s, and this was back when I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and they were reading a book by Bob Buford called Halftime. And in the book Halftime, he presents this idea of you've achieved success, you've achieved what you wanted to do with your career, or maybe you didn't, but you're basically at one of the highest you're going to be in productivity. You've climbed your corporate ladder, you've built your business, you've had your career, you've achieved what you wanted to achieve, and somewhere in your mid to late 50s, a lot of men, a lot of women realize, I'm on the back stretch now, I'm not going to be building anymore, I'm going to be either A, figuring out how to hand this off to somebody else, or I've got 15 to 20 years to finish well. What would I like to do with my life now? I had a group of men in our church who sat down and read that book, and it was interesting. Several of them sold their businesses, changed their careers, said, I got 15 years left. And I'm not going to be building the empire anymore. Now I have to give it to Jesus. And I want to spend the last 15 to 20 years of productivity doing something for Jesus I wasn't willing to do before. They sold their businesses, they shifted careers, they changed jobs, they got involved in nonprofit corporations, they got heavily involved in ministry because these were their extravagant, loving gifts to God. Taking what they had accumulated, earned, saved, and held up, and one day just said, I'm just going to break all that open and give it to Jesus, even if he does something totally different. Henry Nouwen, one of my favorite authors, taught at Notre Dame, taught at Yale, taught at Harvard, Catholic, fantastic writer. As a guy who is highly influential, knowing politicians, senators, governors, moving in an incredibly elite world of the intellectual intelligentsia, teaching in those major universities, one day just says, you know what, I want to know Jesus better. He gave it all up, resigned his position, and he went to a little community in Toronto, Canada, the L'Arche community, where he worked with mentally handicapped people every day. Can you imagine what it would take to achieve such intellectual and educational status that you teach at Harvard University, and to go from that to, well, now I sit with these mentally handicapped people every day, and I feed them food with a spoon. Henry Nouwen gave that up, but he began to write in a different way than he ever had before. What extravagant gift of what you have learned, what you have experienced, what you have accumulated, what you possess. What extravagant gift do you think Jesus might ask you to give? And would you be willing to give it? Two very big questions. Most of us think, well, I haven't got anything. Not talking material possessions. Who you are is the biggest gift Jesus could receive. What you have experienced, what your temperament and personality is like, what you would do with your days. That's the biggest gift Jesus could ever receive from you. You want to give him an extravagant act of love, you give him yourself. Most of the time, our possessions hold us back from giving Jesus ourselves. We spend too much of our time accumulating and achieving the possession side and acquiring and having and building the empires that we actually don't have the freedom to give him our total selves. We give Jesus the leftover selves after we've done that. That's how we schedule our time and do it all. There was a fellow evangelical covenant pastor. We have churches in Africa and here in the United States. One of them, his name is John Nerumba Karuga. He's the actual head of our denomination's churches in Kenya. And Mandera, Kenya, is where the region he's kind of near. It sits in the upper northeast corner of the country, and it's tucked right in between Ethiopia and Somalia, and then there's a little corner of Kenya that comes up. And it's a very war-torn, difficult, violent area. In November of 2014, gunmen stopped a bus and killed 28 non-Muslims after separating them from the rest of the group. A month later, 36 more people were shot in the head or beheaded by the militant group Al-Shabaab, which is a Somali-led contingent of an Al-Qaeda group. A year later, in December 2015, they killed 2 people in a similar attack. The death toll would have been much, much higher, but Muslim passengers on the bus surrounded the Christian passengers and told Al-Shabaab, if you kill them, you got to kill us too. Most of those were Muslim women, and they protected their lives that way. They killed 148 people last April in nearby Garissa, another town. And Mandera, this site, has been the site of frequent attacks, both locations tucked in the border between Ethiopia and Somalia in the country of Kenya. Our denomination has a branch of it called Covenant World Relief, which goes off and they do, where there's been a hurricane or earthquake, they're there with water, they're there with food, they're there with reconstruction. They build tilapia farms and they do water projects, all sorts of things. And they got a grant together and said, hey, we have a grant to produce peacemaking works and efforts and energies in a hostile environment. We need to find the right person. And after much dialogue, they took the guy who would be the president of the Kenya Evangelical Covenant Church, and they said, would you be willing to kind of be the spearhead on this peacemaking operation We have a grant for it. We can fund it and make it happen. You would be going into these difficult areas and teach racial reconciliation. And it feels weird just because they're all Africans. So the tribal groups will fight. The tribal groups, first they go tribe, language, then they'll go whether they're Christian or Muslim. So Pastor John Niramba said, I'll take the job. He is pastoring a small church. He was selected as the right person, and he would hold the seminars in these rather dangerous locations. He was sent out. Al-Shabaab fighters carried out multiple attacks in the whole region recently. He said, this is an area we've got to start bringing peace and harmony. He was sent first to Garissa. The training focused on the peace, particularly between Christians and Muslims. And Pastor John took the task. He headed for Garissa. And just a week ago or two, he emailed David Husby, who's the head of our Covenant World Relief, and he said, hey, at Garissa, we had a very good peace seminar. It's been going great since yesterday. We're heading to Mandera tomorrow. Pray for us. Pray for Kenya. This is what he said in his email. Mandera is not that safe now, but we must preach peace at all cost. On Friday, July 1st, the bus carrying Pastor John Kiriga was ambushed and he was killed along with 5 others. According to the news reports, the gunman ambushed 2 buses near the Somalia border. The first one was able to speed through. The second one was stopped. Most of the casualties were on the second bus. And a member of the Evangelical Covenant Church of Kenya described the attack saying, he was sitting on the driver's side, and that's where the attackers hailed the bullets. After shooting the driver, the bus stopped, and by God's grace, I jumped through the window running to the bush. Bullets flew over my head, but God shielded me. We came back to the road and met other escapees. And he added that ambulances had picked up the survivors and taken them to a medical center. At the time, he thought Pastor John had survived, but he was actually killed in the attack. Pastor John Niramba was a gifted leader, the Evangelical Covenant Church President Gary Walter said. He loved Jesus. He loved the Covenant Church of Kenya, and we mourn the loss of all those who were killed in this attack. I ask that Covenanters, that's us, will pray for their families. And in response to a previous story on Niramba's death, one former missionary to Kenya, Lisa Zapata, wrote, Pastor John has always talked about his dream of one day reaching Somalia with the gospel of Jesus Christ. He had a heart for Muslims, and he ministered with care and compassion in many remote communities where many of us would never be able to reach. In the pursuit of peace, it cost Pastor John his life. What a great man, David Husby wrote, the director of Covenant World Relief. I wonder what kind of courage we would have if God would say, you have reconciliation talents, you have peacemaking abilities, you have compassion that can go out and reach and touch and love folks that others aren't willing to go reach. And if such is the case, would our extravagant gift of love not be to offer ourselves and say, okay, Jesus, here I am, use me? Because typically what we do in America, we say, hey, Jesus, here's my plans, bless them, right? Let's be honest. That's what we do in America. Most of us go to church not to hear who is Jesus and how do I worship him. We go to church saying, who is God and what can he do for me? It's what we become. What if we said, hey, Lord, I would give you an extravagant gift of my love for you. I don't have possessions. I have me. I have me. Would you want to use me? And what I've studied in Scripture and what I've prayed and what I know is Jesus would say, absolutely, it's the only thing you have that I do want is who you are. Let's pray. Why don't you stand with me? Lord Jesus, King of the universe, the one who was willing to give up a throne of heaven and glory and power and dominion forever and ever, and you would come to this earth to be born in the confines of a human body, and you would live amongst us as one of us. You would feel what it's like to be tired and hungry and weak, achy. You would feel pain. You would feel injustice. You would feel what it's like to be beaten almost to the point of death and then tortured to the final moments of death. And you would do it on our behalf because you love us. Here we stand acknowledging all that's true before you and saying, Lord, what can I possibly give back to you? I have me, and I don't even know what good I am, but I have me. But I'm willing to say to you, Jesus, if you could use me, my extravagant gift of love back, my thank you back is to say, okay, Lord, direct my paths, direct my steps, tell me what you want me to do. And Lord, where I am blind and where I'm holding on to the wrong things or chasing the wrong career or where I'm stuck with all my possessions, show me. Show me those things, areas where I am blind, and let me see. And may your peace and may your joy reign in my life as I step forward saying, I will love you with all that I am and all that I have. And may I be shaped and made for the eternity that you know and see and understand, but I can only touch by faith. And then, Lord, may I be an agent of your gospel message to others. That you could use me as both an example, maybe a bad one, but I hope a good one, for what it really means to follow you, be with you, to work with you, and to give a life over to you. These things we are praying, some of us for real in our hearts, some of us are still learning and getting there. But we pray them in the name of your power, of your throne of your glory, your name, Jesus Christ. Amen. And God bless you.